Bonjour. Welcome to a new episode of So French, a podcast about the twists and turns, intrigues and insights to all things French.
Every 2 weeks we select the best, most interesting and fascinating of French news stories, all brought to you from our studio in the heart of Paris. My name is Stefan Vries.
And my name is Sara Bertilsson.
This week we'll talk about the tough situation for refugees and migrants in the French capital. We'll bring you an exclusive report from one of the makeshift camps in central Paris.
And is it the end of Allez les Bleues? The French national football team takes on an American super hit to boost the squad ahead of the Euro 2016 championships here in France. And of course, Maud Descamps is here to bring you a fresh French word of the day. But first, this week we saw Saleh Abdeslam return to France. Abdeslam being the only surviving attacker from the Paris terrorist attacks in November 2015. Stefan, what is happening to Abdeslam now?
Well, he was transferred from Belgium, where he was arrested and where he was hiding out for 4 months. So he was being transferred by helicopter to Paris, where he was presented to the judges, to the prosecutors, and now he's incarcerated in Europe's biggest prison in Fleury-Mérogis, that's south of Paris, where he is in isolation, so he can't talk to other prisoners. And of course, I assume that the French police and secret services are now interrogating him to get as much information as possible. But of course, it's a relief for, I think, the family of the victims that the only suspect who's still alive is now back in Paris and can be tried. That, of course, should be a relief for the families of the victims.
What do we know about his conditions in prison?
Well, it's hard to say. French prisons have a very bad reputation. France has been convicted many times by the European Court of Human Rights. Fleury-Mérogis is the largest prison in Europe. There are over 4,000 prisoners in the building, which is only built for 2,500 prisoners. So there's over 150% occupation. The conditions are very harsh. The building was built like in the 60s, and he is in an isolation cell. So that means that he's cannot contact other prisoners. He is, however, allowed to receive visitors. He also can receive phone calls. So it's not a punishment. It's just basically to avoid that he is exchanging information from other prisoners, or maybe that other prisoners may kill him, because of course he is a very valuable source of information, and his life is at risk as well. So he's in this prison in the south of Paris being interrogated, and that can last many months because the French judicial system is a bit slow, and I don't think we will see any process for the next 3 or 4 years. It can take a very, very long time.
Well, terror has not been the only defining issue for the French President François Hollande's term. So has also unemployment and a split left. Many in the president's own Socialist Party is accusing the government of failing to live up to campaign promises and pushing through a right-wing agenda. Others blame him for giving the far left side of the party too much influence and not going far enough with economic reform. So, one could easily call it a counter-offensive when the president's camp this week launched Et oh la gauche with the slogan Ça va mieux. It's getting better. Well, the idea is to show that the left is united behind the president and his policies.
Mais la réalité, c'est que ça va mieux.
Ça va mieux. Factuellement, quand on regarde les chiffres macroéconomiques, ça va mieux.
La France va mieux.
La France va mieux.
Ça va mieux.
Je pense que les choses vont mieux.
Je pense que ça va mieux.
Ça va mieux. Ça va mieux.
Ça va mieux. Oui, ça va mieux.
Ça va mieux. Comme dirait le président de la République, ça va mieux, même si ça ne se voit pas encore.
So, Stefan, ça va mieux?
Well, I'm doing fine, thank you, Sara. I don't know about the country. However, this week there were new unemployment statistics, and actually the unemployment is going down for the first time in a very long time. 60,000 less people are looking for a job now, which is the biggest decrease in over 10 years. So if you look at just the unemployment, then you would think it's going better. But if you look at the unemployment compared to the moment when François Hollande took office in 2012, there are almost 800,000 more people unemployed than before that. So you have to be very optimistic to say that it is going better. François Hollande has been saying all the last couple of years that he's going to turn around the courbe du chômage, so the unemployment curve in statistics, but he never said compared to which moment, because, well, when he became a president, there were far less jobless than now. So if he wants to get down the unemployment, then he can compare it to last year, maybe then he has a small chance. But everything is a matter of perception. That's the advantage of statistics as well. You can, it's just like tea leaves. You can see anything you like in it. I wouldn't say France is doing better, but we're 1 year ahead of the presidential campaign, the presidential elections. So the campaign has more or less started this week. And, well, maybe it's some kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. The ministers are telling themselves that what they have been doing the last 4 years is finally working. But I'm not sure whether the French voter really believes what they are saying.
Well, so what about this trial then to convince the voters with this new initiative, EO la gauche? Is that going to work?
Yeah, very strange name. AO is like, come on, the left. I really have no idea what they want to do with this. And I think we're not the only ones, because all newspapers were asking, what the hell? Who invented this word?
You do wonder who the spin doctors of the Socialist Party are.
It's incredible, because they're supposed to be smart people. They're surrounded by a lot of very smart advisors. And then they come up with such a, strange phrase. So this really shows how maybe desperate they are, and they really have no ideas. But, AO, well, it sounds nice, but I really have no idea what it means.
Hey-ho!
And all of this happens to the backdrop of more civil unrest. Nuit debout, the movement which grew out of the protest against the Labour law reform package. We have been talking about that earlier in So French. And major strikes hitting the country almost every week now. One other group which has been on strike this week and which we often hear talking about in France, it's les cheminots, the railroad workers. This week they've been protesting against proposed changes to their working conditions.
So that brings us to this week's So French word. Maud Descamps has been taking a closer look at this very French word, cheminot. Bonjour Maud.
Hi Stefan.
So what's a cheminot? Tell us.
Yes, a cheminot is a railwayman. So a guy who works for the railway company, usually like in France, it's a national company. Here in France, the railwayman union is pretty strong, and once in a while there are strikes, well, like very often we can say. And this is what happened this week. Actually, it was the third day of strike since the beginning of the year. So I looked up in the dictionary to see where this word was from, and at the very beginning, un cheminot, a railwayman, was a person who worked for the railway company, but they were wandering itinerant workers walking along the rails to find some construction work to do. So the word cheminot comes from the verb cheminer, which is not cheminée, nothing to do with that, but cheminée means walking along the path. The very first cheminots were in fact considered as a vagabond, wandering along the rail, sometimes working, sometimes begging for money or even stealing. And through the years, the word has evolved to designate the employees of the National Railway Company.
So they were basically outlaws, but what are they today, the cheminots?
Well, the meaning has changed a lot. Today there are around 153,000 cheminots in France. It's huge. They are mainly employed by the SNCF, which is the National Railway Company, and they are considered as privileged people with a lot of advantages, like holidays, for instance. But for the past few years, the SNCF has been cutting jobs in the company, 1,400 in 2016, and the company is also trying to change the work conditions. For instance, today, un cheminot is guaranteed of 52 weekends, which means 2 days off. consecutive days off per year. But with the new proposal now on the table, this would reduce to 30 weekends per year, which is also pretty a lot of weekends off. Another example, workers are currently guaranteed 15 hours between two shifts, and with the new proposal, the break would be shortened to 13 hours, which is not a big difference. One last example, today workers must be notified of their work schedule several days in advance, and tomorrow the rule might change to schedule defined the same day. So we can see the changes are not that big, and the situation is still pretty privileged comparing to other workers here in France. And anyhow, we can see that through the years, the word cheminot has grown very far from its very first meaning.
So from vagabond to somebody very privileged, cheminot. Merci beaucoup, Maud.
Thank you, Stefan.
And you've been wandering around yourself as well, and that's our next topic. Only about 6% of the migrants and refugees who reach Europe from the Middle East and Africa ask for asylum in France. In 2015, only 3,500 Syrians applied here in France for asylum. Still, the country is struggling with its response to the crisis. France has been criticized for not doing enough and far less than many of its fellow European countries. The disastrous living conditions in the migrant camps in Calais and Dunkirk reaches the front pages once in a while, only to quickly thereafter disappear from the public's attention.
But it's not only by the English Channel that people fleeing war and misery are left to their own devices. In central Paris, several hundreds of migrants are struggling for survival with little or no help from the authorities. Last weekend, about 100 of them decided to occupy an empty high school in an attempt to find some decent living conditions and denounce the inhuman conditions in the makeshift camps in the streets of Paris. Our own Maud Descamps went to Stalingrad in the northern eastern part of Paris to find out what the situation is really like. Here's her report.
Every day, the same scenario. Ahmad packs his few belongings, ready to be taken in a welcome center by the police. But once again, the police didn't show up this morning, meaning he'll have to spend the night here between the loudly sound of the metro and the non-stop traffic. This young man has left South Sudan 11 months ago. After a few weeks in the jungle refugee camp in Calais, he decided to come to Paris to find better living conditions. Since then, as 500 other migrants, Ahmad, aged 26, has been waiting and hoping for better days.
I don't have a tent, I just have a sleeping bag. Sometimes one of the friends I have met here helps me and allow me to sleep with him in his tent. But to be honest, I don't really sleep. With the traffic and the dangers the night brings, no one really sleeps here. I know that some of the refugees don't even have blankets or sleeping bags. They just spend the night on a cardboard.
To better these conditions and help them in their administrative procedures, volunteers like Julian have created an association to bring Ahmad and the other migrants food or medicine. They also help the migrants to get a room in a welcome center. For that, the refugees have to be on site when the evacuation begins, an experience quite traumatic for some, as Julian told me.
Usually it is very early in the morning, it starts around 5 a.m. And to give you an idea about the way it works, the police encircles the site here in Stalingrad, so they avoid migrants who are not here when the police arrives to enter this perimeter. The migrants who already were on site are taken to buses that will drive them to welcome centers, and the others who missed the evacuation stay here. And this is a pretty big issue for them because usually early in the morning many migrants have already left the Stalingrad camp for their appointments at the administrative center, so they miss their chance to get a roof.
According to the association helping the migrants, the Stalingrad camp has never been so full. More and more refugees who have been to Calais choose now to stay in Paris, even if that means they have to sleep in the street.
There was a report by Maud Descamps. And it's not only at the makeshift camps that volunteers are filling the void left by the authorities. Private initiatives are growing. Action Emploi Réfugiés connects refugees and employers, and they launched their app this month. Dozens of employers have already signed up, as well as hundreds of migrants. And more than 9,000 French families have registered on the website Calm. It's a website where people can offer to open their homes to the migrants.
And finally, the French DJ superstar David Guetta was picked to do the official UEFA Euro 2016 song. And now, the French national team Les Bleues have picked theirs, and it's American.
Oh my.
It's Kiss's 1979 mega hit, I Was Made for Loving You. Do you remember this, Stefan?
Yeah, I did. I was very young at the time, but I do remember Kiss, yeah.
Well, now it's been renamed I Was Made for Loving You, My Team.
Oh.
It's performed by, rewritten by the French electro-rock band Skip the Use. So, let's take a listen.
I was made for loving you, my team. You were made for loving me. Out tonight, I wanna give it all to you.
Well, my ears are hurting, and it's in English for a French team. That's a revolution as well.
Well, we'll see. We'll see how many times this song will be played. Normally it's played after every victory by the team.
Yeah.
Euro 2016 kicks off on June the 10th with France versus Romania. 24 teams will then be battling it out for about four weeks with the final here in Paris on the 10th of July. Well, that wraps up this edition of So French. You can follow us on Twitter. It's @SoFrenchNews. And if you have any questions or suggestions, just send us an email. Our address is sofrench@sofrench.news.
And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. You can do that in iTunes or in SoundCloud, or you can share So French with all of your friends. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode of So French. We hope you'll join us then. Thank you for listening, and au revoir.